Today, we're going to take, in this blog post, we're going to take a look at how to add a deployment to an existing GoldenGate microservices architecture. Now, in order to do this, you have to have the GoldenGate binaries installed for microservices architecture. I covered that in a previous blog post. So in this blog post, we're going to dive into the Oracle GoldenGate Configuration Assistant, or other words known as OGGCA, which is used to build out deployments. It actually builds out your first service manager and then the associated deployments. So we're going to show you guys how this walks through and how do you do this, and inside of most environments, or actually all environments, to build out your GoldenGate infrastructure or your deployments for everything. And so we're going to be doing this. I have a Docker container here up and running, where I've already got the GoldenGate binaries installed. I've already have a GoldenGate microservices architecture running. So the service manager is already up and running behind a reverse proxy, and everything's ready to go. So I'm going to show you how to run GoldenGate Configuration Assistant, and then how that adds in a deployment into the framework, and then show you guys what it all looks like. So to level set, if I run Firefox here, just so we can see what it all looks like. If I go into, since I'm just here on localhost, we'll just go HTTPS localhost 16,000, which is my service manager port. With the reverse proxy put in place, you can actually just drop the 16,000 and it'll be on port 443. But since I'm on the local host where it's at, I'm behind the reverse proxy, so I'm just going to use 6,000. I'm going to log in as OGG admin. And what you'll see after we log in is that I have 4 running services which are associated with the admin server, distribution performance metric servers, and receiver service for Atlanta. If you come down here to deployments, you see I have the service manager and deployment already running. So what we're going to do here is actually run Oracle GoldenGate Configuration Assistant and add in another deployment at that time. So that's where we're starting. And so now we're going to close that. We go back to here. So now, in order to run Oracle GoldenGate Configuration Assistant, you have to be into your GoldenGate home. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to OGG home. And if you look here, I'm in PWD. I'm in opt apt Oracle product 19.1 OGG core 1. This is just my GoldenGate home. Your GoldenGate home would possibly be a little bit different depending on how you architect your GoldenGate microservices architecture machines. The nice thing about this is that I have 19.1 inside the path structure here, or the directory structure. So when 20.1 or a later version comes out, or even an early version, 18.1 or 12.3, I can use the version numbers in the path, and then my binary sets are separate from each other, because what we're going to do is actually install the new deployment in what we call the deployment base, right? So if I go to /opt apt Oracle GG, this is my deployment base. And if you look at this, I've already got Atlanta out here. I've got something called Frankfurt. I've got the service manager. I'm going to go ahead and remove the Tampa one, because we're going to rename this guy Tampa, or when we build the other. But that's just pretty much the deployment base. So that's where we should expect to see files after we run the configuration assistant. So now I'm going to go back to OGG home. I'm going to go into the, if we do an ls on this, you see the directory structure. It looks a lot like an Oracle database directory structure. But what's nice here is the bin directory. So if I cd in the bin, you'll see that I have a lot of executables. And if I just do an ls for .sh, I found in the configuration assistant, okay, oggca.sh. So now it's already set to be an executable. So I'm just going to go run oggsh. And so now it's going to bring up the configuration assistant here in just a second. Once it comes up, Here you go. Now, this is the first screen of the configuration assistant, and what you see here is that at the very on the left hand side is just our typical Oracle Universal Installer, how just multiple steps you got to walk through. On the right hand side here, you got Service Manager details. The first radio button that's selected is Existing Service Manager. So this is just saying that, hey, I'm going to run this against the Service Manager that I have running on this box, or that I already have installed. If you click the radio button for Create New Service Manager, then here's where you put your deployment home. And so in this case, it would be, as we discussed a second ago, opt, apt, Oracle, deployments, Service Manager, or whatever you wanted to call it separately. You just have to fill in this part here and then click Select. And if you want to register it as a daemon on the back of inside the Linux system, you would just click this checkbox here. At the end, it would ask you to run a register service manager.sh script out of your deployment home, and then that would set up as a daemon on the Linux Unix boxes. Or you can click the integrate with XAG. This would allow you to integrate with Oracle RAC systems. So just because I'm doing this against an existing service manager, I'm just going to select the radio button for existing service manager. Now, down here where it says service manager connection details, listening host name and address. If this was the first time walking through it, it would have the host name here of the box. So if you were on a Linux box and you typed in host name, the name should match. Second time through is tying more to the IP address. So it's just going to pick the publicly available IP address, and if it's not the right IP address, you need to go in and change it. You can also swap that out with the host name, and it worked. But the UI here will automatically select the IP address. The listening port that what you see here is actually the port where you want Service Manager to run. So in my case here that I've got, since I got Service Manager already up and running, is running on port 16,000. And keep in mind, that's behind the reverse proxy. So it's running on port 16,000. So if I go to localhost 16,000, it will automatically bring up the Service Manager page. So after you fill in all this information, you click Next. And then you'll get to the configuration options where you say, hey, what deployments do you want? What do you want to do with your deployments? In this case, we want to add. So I'm going to say add a deployment. I'll do another video at some point about removing the deployment as well. But you can add a deployment. Click the radio button, click next, and then here on the next screen here, you're going to provide the name of the deployment, right? And so if you click the enable sharding checkbox, this will actually set the deployment up to be used with the Oracle database for sharding purposes, and there's more details inside of that which we won't go into in this setup. And then software home, don't confuse software home with your deployment home because it's not the same thing. Software home is actually referring to the OGG home, right? So if you have OGG home environment variable set, this automatically populates to what you want it to be. If that's not correct, you just should go in the browse and select go in the browse and you select where you want it to be. So this is just your OGG home. Click next. And then your deployment home. So if you have an environment variable called the deployment base set, this will automatically populate. But if you notice, it does not have the name of the deployment afterwards. So you have to do Tampa at the end of this. This is the name of my deployment, and then I'm ready to go. If you don't have the environment variable deployment base set, then you click browse and connect to the correct one you want to connect to, and do everything you got to do. Now, this little radio button here says customize directories. If I click this, this overrides the deployment home up here, and you can change the locations to where you want your configuration files, your bootstrap files, your security files. This is mostly your wallet, so runtime support information, your checkpoint files and stuff like that, and your trail files. So now you can point things all over the place, put them in different directory structures if you would like. For simplicity of this approach, I'm actually just going to keep it all on the same box and the same directory structure, so that's where I go. But if you noticed here, if you notice that there's an etc and then there's a var directory that's built underneath the deployments. These correspond to environment variables that you would have to use for admin client and the things that I talked about in various posts, where you have the OGG var home and OGG Etsy home. Is how you control what goes into these directories. And if you also notice that the deployment base here, right, is outside of the GoldenGate home. And that's really nice because of the fact that it's outside the GoldenGate home. So now if you want to upgrade later, you can actually install the new GoldenGate binaries for the 20.1, for example, and then you can move your whole deployment over without affecting um, where all the locations are very easily. So just by keeping your deployment homes outside of the GoldenGate home makes your life a lot simpler. Click next. Then you get to the page where you have the environment variables that you would set up for this deployment. These environment variables are maintained on a per deployment basis. And so I'm setting my GoldenGate home to where that should be pretty unique, and it's pretty simple to point to that. Oracle home, since I'm running this Docker image on a separate box, not corresponding with an Oracle database, I'm on a separate box like in the hub and spoke model, for example. I'm just using the Oracle client software, so my Oracle home points to the Oracle client software I'm using. LD library path is pointing to that client software /lib, so I know where to find the libraries I need. And then TNS admin is really just where I want to keep my TNS names.aura and listener.aura type stuff. So that way the GoldenGate knows how to reference these things if need be. And then Oracle SID, if I was on a box that had an Oracle running and I need to access that Oracle directly, I would just put the Oracle SID here. The nice thing about this too is that there's more environment variables you want to add or you need to add. You can just click the add button, or if you want to take something away, you can do the remove button. Click next. And now administrator account, where it says administrator account, administrator really ties to the administrator role that we have inside of GoldenGate Microservices. This is really tied to the role-based security that's tied into there. So a user who's created as an administrator role can actually create deployments. And so you can use him or use that user and log in here and create the deployment. In my case here, I'm just going to use the security user, which is actually the OGG admin. You'll see a lot of the Oracle guys using that when we do demos and everything else, and you saw it when I logged into the Service Manager. The security user is the overall equivalent user. It's kind of like sysdba inside the Oracle database. It's the overall user who has access to it. So if you have assigned somebody to the security role, you have access to everything. So I'm just going to go ahead and put him in here. I'm going to say OGG admin, and I'm going to put it in the password that which I need for it. And if you notice here, again, this is just tying to the administrator role accounts. You can use it with the Service Manager. If you click the checkbox here that says enable strong passwords, then you have to have at least 12 characters, 2 letters, and so on and so forth type rules. If you uncheck that, you can use real simple passwords. Click next. Security options. The security options here are really designed around how Service Manager is set up and for you to integrate into that environment. If you set initial deployments, if you set up your Service Manager as an unsecure Service Manager, this will show you that it's unsecured. In my case here at the very top, I've got a SSL/TLS security because I've set up my Service Manager to be secure. So any deployments I put into that has to be secure. And so the server, on the server side, I'm going to put the wallet which I'm going to have access to. These are all self-signed wallets in this case. And then the client side is actually the wallet for the distribution service. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the wallets that I need. For both of these. And keep in mind, I'm just using self-signed certs here, so it's just for demo purposes, but you can swap these out with CA-approved certs and things like that, so it makes your environment more secure. Click next. The crypto protocols that which we have access to are TLS version 1.1 and 1.2. By default, we're saying 1.2 because we want everybody to be as secure as possible. And then the Cipher suites that which we have access to, there's probably about 30 of these, I think, last time I counted them. But you have a lot of ciphers that you can use. By default, we select all of them, and so ciphers are used in the exact order they're from top to bottom. So you can change these. You can take some, take them away, add them in, move them up and down, do different things here. But just for demo purposes, I'm just going to use all of them for whatever I need. Click next. And then here's where you're going to start assigning ports. A lot of people have probably heard over the last couple of years that microservices uses a lot of ports. But if you put a reverse proxy in front of that, all these ports get down to a single port of 443, and it makes your environment a lot more secure and a lot less hectic to try and manage because you can just access over 443. But in order for a deployment to be usable and everything else, you have to assign each one of the services a port. So if you look here, it just says my service manager details. So it's got things that I've set up at the beginning of this configuration. And then I'm selecting, hey, I want to add in the admin server. I want to add in or enable the admin server, enable the distribution server, enable the receiver service. And so, but since I'm adding this in, I have to use a different port besides what I would use for my first deployments, because I've got another deployment out there called Atlanta, so that's on 16,001, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to put this on 18,001 for my admin server, and then 18,002. If you notice, this is all it does in sequential order. Now, monitoring is not enabled by default. So if I clicked enabled monitoring, now my performance metric services is enabled, and I have the port numbers already assigned. Then the two databases or two NoSQL databases that you have access to is Berkeley database, BDB, or Light Memory database. I usually just always take the Berkeley database and just call it a day. But you got to provide a place where to store it. And so what I typically do is say I want to store it in the deployment base, and I'm going to put it into my Tampa directory for the deployment, and then I'm just going to call it BDB, right? Just so I know who the database belongs to and what is it really. It's all I'm doing. And then I'm going to click next, and that brings you to this step to say, hey, replication options, provide your default schema. This is really tied back to, like in classic architecture, you would go into the globals file and say GG schema, and then provide where you want the GoldenGate objects to be created at. So in my case here, I always did GGATE, which is Ggate, which is like I've seen customers do GG admin and stuff like that. So you can do that here as well. But this is where you're going to create your check. This is the schema where your checkpoint files, tracing tables, and all heartbeat tables and all that stuff will be created under. So you just provide where you want that to be. You click next, you get the summary. And then the summary here will show you everything that you have access to, or everything that you have set up that you want to have built. This is the only place where you can generate a response file. And it's a good idea to generate a response file, because after you set this up, you can use that response file, make small changes to it, and then you can create your additional deployments on the fly or in a silent mode options. But in order to get here, you have to run the configuration assistant at least once and walk through all these steps to get to this point. And then once you have the response file, you can, as I said, you can edit that and do what you want with it for deployment purposes. Then click finish. And it's going to go through and import users, register the deployment, start services, and everything. And so now I have everything done. The deployment's built, and then I can click close, and I'm ready to go. So now, how do I verify this? And in order to verify, I'm just going to run Firefox again. All right, I'm just going to run Firefox again. And then I'm going to go back into my service manager. And again, because I'm behind the reverse proxy, I'm just going to go say port 16,000. And that's going to bring up the login screen again. I'm going to log in as a security user. Sign in. And I should have 8 running services now once this comes in. I have 8. So that means I got 2 deployments. There's Atlanta and Tampa. And what's nice about this, I can randomly select this. I'm going to select Tampa. And I've got the 4 services up and running here on the ports that I assigned. And if you look at the deployments right down at the bottom in alphabetical order, I have Atlanta, Service Manager, and Tampa. So now I have all the stuff that I need running and I'm ready to go. So I could access all of these services by clicking on the ports for this new deployment and continue to build out all the things that I need to do for my extracts, replicats, distribution paths, and check the receiver service and look at performance based on the performance metrics service. So that was just really the quick and easy way of using the GUI for the first time, or even adding in a deployment using the configuration assistant overall. So I hope you guys find that useful and very beneficial. If you got anything, leave a question or comment. Feel free to use the website to do that. Thanks.